January 332 BC, on the eastern Mediterranean coast. Phoenicia, Tyre. Imagine a fortress rising from the sea before you, and then you realize you cannot surround an island with infantry standing on the beach. You cannot starve a city while ships are still quietly carrying food in from the sea. And you cannot break walls your army cannot even get close to. That was exactly what Alexander's 30,000 Macedonian soldiers were facing. They stood on the Phoenician shore, looking toward Tyre, a city isolated in the Mediterranean. Tyre was almost 700 meters from the mainland, a distance that seemed small on a map, but became an abyss for a land army. Its towers rose above the sea, while warships patrolled around its guarded harbors. Tyre's walls rose straight from the water, leaving no place for ladders and no ground for siege towers. The battlefield in front of the Macedonians was not a plain, not a city gate, but the sea. Inside the island fortress, tens of thousands of Tyrians trusted three things: their walls, their navy, and the Mediterranean. They had reason to believe. 2 centuries earlier, Babylon had besieged Tyre for 13 years and still failed to break the city. Now Alexander had arrived with a terrifying land army, but on the sea, he barely had enough ships to touch Tyre. His soldiers could see the city, hear the defenders, and watch the banners moving in the sea wind, but they still could not reach it. For any normal commander, this was the moment to withdraw, or at least to negotiate. But Alexander chose a solution so insane that the Tyrians first laughed from their walls. He would tear down Old Tyre on the mainland, then drag its stones into the Mediterranean. Then he would build a road through the sea, straight toward the island fortress. Tyre believed the Mediterranean would keep Alexander out. Alexander decided to make the Mediterranean carry him in. And when the first stones fell into the water, the strangest siege of his life began. For the next 7 months, Tyre would be pulled into stone, fire, warships, and the sea. Alexander did not attack Tyre just to conquer another city. He attacked because this island fortress controlled a coast he could not safely leave behind. From Tyre's harbors, enemy ships could threaten Macedonian supplies and keep the sea dangerous behind him. If Alexander marched south while Tyre stayed free, his rear would never be secure. Before he could move toward Egypt, he had to break the city in the water. But when the Macedonians reached the shore, the danger became obvious. Tyre was not a normal city with roads, gates, and stone walls on land. It stood almost 700 meters offshore, surrounded by waves, ships, and fortified harbors. A normal city gave attackers ground for ladders, siege towers, and battering rams. Tyre gave Alexander only seawater, harbor walls, warships, and stone rising from the waves. Any attack had to come by ship, and any ship that came close would face arrows, stones, and fire from above. Tyrian warships could sail from the harbors, strike the attackers, and return behind the walls. Even hunger could not easily defeat Tyre, while ships still brought food through the sea. That was why the Tyrians believed their city was almost impossible to conquer. Alexander first tried to take the city without destroying it. He asked to enter Tyre and sacrifice inside the temple of Melkart. To the Tyrians, that request was not just religious. If Alexander entered the island temple, Tyre would be recognizing him as master of the city. The Tyrians refused and told him to sacrifice in Old Tyre on the mainland instead. That answer protected Tyre's pride, but it challenged Alexander in front of his army. Alexander sent envoys again, giving the city one last chance to avoid war. The Tyrians answered by killing the Macedonian envoys and throwing their bodies into the sea. Their bodies fell from the walls into the same water Alexander still could not cross. From that moment, the siege was no longer only about strategy. It became revenge. Alexander ordered Old Tyre on the mainland to be stripped for materials. Stone was pulled from old walls and dragged toward the shoreline. Timber, ropes, wooden piles, carts, and laborers gathered along the coast. Then the first stones dropped into the Mediterranean. The real battle had begun. From the walls, the Tyrians mocked the Macedonians, throwing rubble into the sea. But Alexander was not playing with the water. He was bringing the battlefield closer. And every stone that disappeared beneath the waves made the island feel a little less safe. The Macedonians began building a causeway from the mainland toward the island fortress. Near the shore, the water was shallow enough for the work to move quickly. Groups of soldiers hauled stones from Old Tyre and dropped them into the blue-grey water. Wooden piles were driven into the seabed to hold the growing structure in place. Rubble filled the gaps, while heavy timber helped the road resist the current. From above, the causeway looked like a strip of land cutting into the Mediterranean. Every day, it stretched farther toward Tyre's walls. The Tyrians no longer saw a joke. They saw distance disappearing. The sea that had protected them for centuries was being filled in front of their eyes. Alexander's army was not crossing the water in ships. It was forcing the coastline itself to move forward. But the closer the road came to the city, the more dangerous the work became. The water grew deeper, the waves struck harder, and the road needed more stone and timber. The workers also moved closer to the range of Tyre's walls. Arrows began falling onto the crowded men building the causeway. Small Tyrian boats came out from the harbors and attacked the work from both sides. Light ships carrying archers fired into laborers who could barely protect themselves. The men hauling stone could not hold shields all the time. Their hands were busy with ropes, baskets, beams, and rubble. Macedonian soldiers tried to cover the workers while the road still pushed forward. The causeway became a battlefield before it ever touched the island. On one narrow strip of water, men were building, carrying, ducking, and dying. Some workers slipped on wet stone while arrows struck the shields above them. Others dragged timber through knee-deep water as waves broke against the unfinished road. Every few meters gained had to be held under fire. Every load of stone became part of a fight. The Tyrians attacked the road because they understood what it meant. If the causeway reached the wall, the sea would no longer be enough. If Alexander's infantry found solid ground near Tyre, the island would face a real assault. Alexander responded by turning the head of the causeway into a fighting platform. Protective screens of hide and canvas were raised to shield the workers. Large siege towers were built at the front of the road moving into the sea. The towers were covered with rawhide to resist fire from the defenders. Catapults were mounted high on the towers to shoot back at Tyre's walls. From the island, defenders watched war machines rising from a road that should not exist. From the mainland, Macedonian soldiers saw the city becoming less unreachable every day. Tyre could not simply laugh anymore. The road was coming closer, and if it reached the walls, Alexander's land army would finally have a path into the city. So Tyre struck harder. Its boats came closer to the causeway. Its archers fired more aggressively from the walls. Its defenders aimed at workers, engineers, guards, and the siege machines themselves. Stones crashed down near the construction crews. Arrows struck the wooden screens. Ships swept along the sides of the causeway, looking for unprotected men. The battle was no longer waiting for a final assault. It was already happening on the water, under arrows, smoke, and sea spray. Tyre knew the causeway had to be destroyed before it reached the island. Alexander knew the same thing. Once the road began, the siege could only end in one of two ways. Either Tyre would fall, or his army would bleed itself against the sea. The Tyrians prepared one of the most dangerous attacks of the siege. They chose an old transport ship and turned it into a weapon. Its hull was packed with dry wood, pitch, sulfur, and burning material. The deck was loaded with fuel that could turn one ship into a floating inferno. The target was clear. Alexander's siege towers stood at the head of the causeway. If those towers burned, the workers would lose their protection. If the road's front collapsed, the whole Macedonian advance would be thrown backward. Tyrian ships towed the fire vessel toward the head of the causeway under protection from their fleet. The defenders waited for the right wind, the right current, and the right moment. Then they released it. Flames spread across the deck, as the fire ship drifted toward the wooden towers. Smoke rolled across the water while Macedonian workers realized what was coming. The burning ship struck the front of the causeway and burst into a wall of fire. Flames climbed the siege towers and tore through the rawhide coverings. The wooden frames burned while soldiers rushed forward with water and tools. Tyrian ships attacked from both sides, firing arrows at anyone trying to save the machines. The head of the causeway became a scene of fire, smoke, panic, and collapsing timber. The siege towers fell into the sea as flames consumed weeks of labor. Part of the road was damaged, and the Macedonian advance was suddenly thrown back. For the first time, Alexander's impossible road had been stopped by Tyre's navy. The defenders had proved that stone alone could not defeat the island. As long as Tyre controlled the water, it could attack the causeway again and again. It could burn siege towers before they reached the walls. It could attack workers from angles Macedonian infantry could not answer. It could keep food and supplies moving into the city through its harbors. Alexander now understood that the siege could not be won from the shore alone. The army needed a road, but the road needed protection from the sea. So Alexander changed the entire battle. He ordered the causeway rebuilt wider and stronger than before. The damaged head of the road was repaired. New defenses were prepared to stop another fire attack. More materials were dragged toward the shore. The Macedonians did not abandon the project. They returned to the water. But Alexander knew rebuilding the road was not enough. He needed ships. He needed to take from Tyre the one thing Tyre trusted most, the sea. So he moved to gather fleets from the cities that had already submitted to him. Sidon provided sailors and vessels from the Phoenician coast. Byblos and other coastal cities added more ships to Alexander's growing force. The kings of Cyprus then brought a powerful fleet into his service. Within weeks, Alexander had more than 200 ships around Tyre. The king, who once barely had enough ships to touch the city, now returned with a massive fleet. When the new armada appeared off the coast, Tyre's defenders saw the siege change. The city that trusted its navy was about to lose control of the water. The causeway would rise again, but this time it would not stand alone. Alexander had turned the siege from a land attack into a war for the sea. Alexander's fleet moved across the Mediterranean waters around Tyre in disciplined formations. The Tyrian navy could no longer strike the causeway freely and return safely to the harbors. Outnumbered and pressured, Tyrian ships withdrew toward the protection of the city. Alexander ordered his allied ships to seal the island from both sides. Phoenician ships moved against the southern harbor and blocked that entrance. Cypriot ships moved against the northern harbor and closed the other side of the city. Tyre was still an island, but the sea around it was no longer free. The harbors that once kept the city alive began to look like gates of a trap. Food, supplies, and reinforcements became harder to move through the blockade. The defenders still fought, but the direction of the siege had changed. Alexander brought artillery closer on land and mounted more engines on ships. Catapults fired from the causeway while shipborne engines struck from the water. Tyre was now attacked from the road Alexander built and from the sea he had captured. The defenders answered with every method they could invent. They sent divers into the water to cut the anchor cables of Macedonian ships. Alexander replaced the ropes with iron chains so the divers could not cut them easily. The Tyrians dropped large stones into the shallows to keep assault ships away from the walls. Macedonian crews worked under fire to drag those underwater obstacles away. Tyrian engineers built extra wooden towers on the walls to raise their firing positions. Archers launched burning arrows at ships and siege engines pressing near the island. Screens were hung across damaged walls to weaken the force of incoming missiles. Behind cracked sections, defenders built secondary barriers to stop a sudden breakthrough. The city was trapped, but it was still fighting with skill and fury. This was not a siege of waiting. It was a moving fight between engineers, sailors, soldiers, and desperate defenders. Tyre launched another dangerous naval strike from the northern harbour. Its ships surprised part of the Cypriot force and damaged several vessels. For a short moment, the blockade looked as if it might break. Alexander reacted quickly and led ships to cut off the Tyrian squadron. The Tyrian ships were driven back, destroyed, or trapped inside the harbour. After that, Tyre's navy could no longer save the city as it had before. The island still had walls, but the sea no longer belonged to it. The Causeway now advanced under stronger protection. Macedonian engines fired from land. Allied ships pressed closer from the water. Tyre was being squeezed from directions it had never faced at the same time. The defenders could still repair. They could still shoot. They could still fight. But the freedom that had made the island powerful was disappearing. Alexander began looking for one weak place where all his pressure could break through. He found it near the southern side of the city, close to the water. Assault ships carrying battering rams were brought toward the southern wall. Under covering fire, the rams struck the same section again and again. Stone dust fell into the sea as the wall began to show clear damage. Tyrian defenders rushed to repair the cracks, but the pressure kept returning. The island fortress still stood. But for the first time, Alexander had found a place where it could bleed. At dawn, Macedonian assault ships advanced toward the damaged southern wall of Tyre. Catapults from the Causeway and ships hammered the battlements to pin defenders down. Battering rams mounted on warships struck the weakened wall through spray and smoke. Broken stone fell into the sea as the breach opened wider with every blow. At the same time, Alexander ordered attacks against the harbours to split Tyre's defenders. Phoenician and Cypriot ships pressed toward the harbour entrances while missiles filled the air. The Causeway also threatened the city, forcing defenders to watch another front. Tyre was now attacked from land, sea, and broken wall at the same time. The defenders ran from one threatened point to another. One group rushed to the harbour. Another group tried to hold the southern wall. Others stayed near the Causeway, afraid that the road itself would become a gate into the city. This was Alexander's pressure working exactly as intended. Tyre could still fight hard, but it could no longer defend everywhere with the same strength. Alexander sent his elite hypaspists toward the breach at the southern wall. Boarding bridges dropped against the broken masonry as soldiers prepared to cross. Macedonian troops climbed over wet rubble while waves struck below the shattered wall. Tyrian defenders rushed into the breach to push the attackers back toward the sea. The fighting became brutal in the narrow gap where shields crashed against broken stone. Spears drove forward as men struggled for space on the damaged edge of the city. The Tyrians knew that losing this breach meant losing the island itself. They fought with the desperation of people watching their final wall fail. But more Macedonian troops forced their way across the assault bridges. Behind them, the harbour attacks pulled defenders away from the southern wall. The pressure became too heavy for the city to hold in one place. The Macedonians gained a foothold inside Tyre. Once soldiers were inside the wall, the sea could no longer protect the city. The battles spread from the breach into streets, rooftops, temples, and narrow passages. Tyrian fighters tried to regroup in the city center and hold the last ground. Macedonian soldiers poured through the opening after months of fire, labor, and exhaustion. The siege had reached its most violent stage. This was no longer a battle to reach Tyre. This was the fight inside Tyre itself. The defenders were trapped between enemies entering through the breach and the harbours. Their island fortress had become a city with nowhere left to retreat. Organized resistance began to break under attacks from several directions. Some defenders made a final stand near sacred places inside the city. Others fell in the streets as Macedonian troops advanced through smoke. For the Tyrians, the thing they had trusted most had failed them. The sea had not kept the enemy away. The walls had not stopped the breach. The harbors had not saved the city. After 7 months of resistance, Tyre's walls, harbors, and sea defenses finally collapsed. The city that no land army was meant to touch had been taken by force. When Tyre fell, the violence did not stop at the broken wall. The city paid terribly for 7 months of resistance. The killing of Macedonian envoys made Alexander punish Tyre even harder. Thousands of defenders and civilians died in the final assault. Many survivors were captured and sold into slavery. Ancient sources say many defenders were crucified along the shore. Some people survived by hiding inside temples. Others were spared through the mercy of the Macedonians. But Tyre, the island fortress once seen as untouchable, had been destroyed. Its harbors were captured. Its walls were broken. Its streets were filled with smoke, bodies, and the ruins of resistance. But Tyre's meaning did not end with destruction. When Tyre fell, the eastern Mediterranean changed. A major naval base linked to Persian power was destroyed. Enemy ships lost a vital shelter on the Phoenician coast. Alexander's supply lines became safer. The road toward Gaza and Egypt opened before him. Tyre had stood like a locked gate on the coastline. After 7 months of siege, that gate was smashed open. Soon after, Alexander marched south. Gaza resisted and was crushed. Egypt opened its gates to Alexander. There, he was crowned pharaoh. There, he founded Alexandria. Alexandria later became a center of learning, trade, and power in the ancient world. Without Tyre's fall, the road to Egypt would have been far more dangerous. But Tyre's impact was bigger than one campaign. It changed how cities thought about the sea. For centuries, island fortresses believed water could protect them. They believed distance could replace walls. They believed ships could keep land armies forever away. Tyre believed the same thing. And for a long time, Tyre had been right. But Alexander proved the opposite. A city protected by the sea could still be reached. A wall rising from water could still be broken. An island with no road could still be surrounded. Even geography itself could be attacked. The Causeway became the symbol of that lesson. It began with broken stones from Old Tyre. It survived arrows, fire ships, storms, and counterattacks. It carried workers, siege towers, soldiers, and battering rams toward the island. Long after the battle ended, that road remained. Sand gathered around it. The coastline changed. The island once separated from land became tied to the shore. Alexander did not only conquer Tyre, he changed the map. After 7 months of stone, fire, ships, and blood, Tyre fell. But its fall did more than end a siege. It opened the road to Egypt. It weakened Persian power at sea. It changed the coastline itself. And it proved Alexander's most dangerous weapon was not only his army, it was his ability to turn the impossible into a battlefield.